Welcome to another episode of the Muslims Down Under podcast. In this series, we've been discussing topics revolving around social justice in an effort to educate listeners on misconceptions of Islam as a means to tackle far-right extremism through education and dialogue. My name is Rabia Sharif, and I'll be your host for this episode. So today we have the privilege and honour to be sitting in the Australian Parliament House in the Australian Capital Territory, and I wish to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land we are meeting on, the Ngunnawal people. I wish to acknowledge and respect their continuing culture and the contribution they make to the life of this city and this region. I'm just inserting an audio there. So today we have an extremely exciting podcast. We have the privilege to spend some time with Senator Fatima Payman. Fatima Payman is a senator for Western Australia who began her term this year as the Australian Parliament's first hijab-wearing Muslim woman, and also the current youngest senator serving Australia. And this conversation is very timely considering Senator Payman also just made her first speech recently, right here in the Australian Parliament House. And what a brilliant and powerful first speech that was. As a hijab-wearing Muslim, I'm definitely a fangirl and inspired by your resilience, your confidence, and how true you've remained to your roots in being a Muslim. So with that, Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you, and welcome to the podcast.
Alaikum salam. Thank you so much for having me, Rabia. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. That was really kind of you. And I too acknowledge the Ngunnawal and Ngambri elders, on the lands that we meet upon, as the true custodians and owners of country. It's fantastic that, you guys are having such an awesome podcast running. Being the current youngest, senator, has been such an interesting, hectic, but humbling experience so far. And it's just truly an honour and privilege.
Thank you. And it's an honour and privilege that we have you here and we're using up your very valuable time. So thank you so much. I am definitely inspired, and I think because you did your first speech, and it's sitting in my head. I have to admit I have watched it a few times because I was waiting for the day I can see a person or someone who looks like me standing in the Parliament House. So truly an honour. And I was very inspired by your story. So just to start off briefly, can you share with us a little bit about your life and background and how you reached here today?
It's quite a long story, so I don't know how much time we have. But I think going back to when my dad decided on coming to Australia so that my siblings and I could have a future that he wouldn't have back in Afghanistan, a country that's torn by war and decades of destruction. If my dad hadn't sacrificed and risked his life, I probably wouldn't be where I am today. But the journey started in 1999. Dad arrived in Perth, and from then on worked tirelessly. And in 2003 was able to sponsor my mum, myself, and my two other siblings. And as we started to build our home here in Perth, you do have that sense of reunion with the family. Like, that sense of belonging is established immediately, even if it's, a foreign country that, you've just arrived at. You grow up, especially as a Muslim, where, I was lucky to be in an Islamic school and be surrounded with similar cultures as mine and people who would wear the hijab during school hours. And I remember the adamant, persistence I had upon my parents to let me wear the hijab at the end of year 6, where I was like, I feel like the odd one out of my friends. They're all wearing hijabs outside of school. And both my parents were like, you're a bit too young, take your time. And I remember my dad telling me, look, the hijab is such a symbolic part of your identity that I don't want you to wear it today and then take it off tomorrow. So I'd rather you take your time, make that firm decision, and understand the value of why you're wearing the hijab and wear it with pride, and take your time in making that decision rather than rushing in haste and then realizing it's too soon for me, and then taking it off. So I think that stuck with me, and I've never thought twice about wearing my hijab, and I guess throughout that journey of trying to fit in, and I think we underestimate the struggles of young Muslims, especially with different diaspora communities, their struggles of adjusting and fitting into society, and wanting to be part of that contribution, wanting to be part of that Australian society that we know it to be, the modern day Australia. And it's just been an interesting up and down experience to where I am today, whether it's been through the challenges I've faced with racism and discrimination, where people make comments like, go back to where you came from. That's too common and often heard by many Muslim Australians and people of colour.
Yeah. I definitely, as a hijab wearing Muslim myself, I'm also within the professional space, and I definitely relate with a lot of the things that you just said about discrimination. Unfortunately, it is unfortunate that we have to even talk about the fact that we did go through that. There is also this misconception that we experience as Muslim women who, whether or not you wear the hijab or not, but there's this misconception that we experience limitations and restrictions in life, especially when it comes to things like our career or getting an education. Now, you've been brought up with true Islamic values, and I have to, take my hats off to your parents as well, because I did tear up a little bit when I did watch your speech, and because it just the support and the upbringing is pretty much what resonates and what truly is Islamic. And you also shared a saying of the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, which your father shared with you, which is to seek knowledge from the cradle to the grave, emphasizing the importance of education. And it was very rare to see women getting educated, let alone choosing careers like being an engineer, or like myself being a lawyer, or like yourself being a senator.
Yes.
So how did you choose this career, and did you ever feel that Islam or like your religion, your faith ever held you back?
No. So I think the credit going to my parents in terms of the upbringing, I never had that sense of double standards. I've got two younger brothers, and there's me and my sister, and they were completely equal in the treatment of their boys to their girls. And having that opportunity to go out there and seek not only a solid education at a Islamic college, but also move on then to do a degree that I was passionate about, and that was anthropology and sociology. And I think it was that the experiences that I had growing up, but also seeing the challenges my dad went through as a migrant worker with English being his second language, and just understanding the complexities of having those intersectional identities, that steered me towards leadership. And leadership wasn't a concept that was unfamiliar to me, because I was teacher's pet and student counselor and head girl back in school. But it was an avenue that I felt most comfortable pursuing. So whether it was being Muslim Student Association president for 2 years at university, or it was running a charity organization and establishing the Perth base, or whether it was just being a youth representative through Edmund Rice Centre or the WA Police Muslim Community Advisory Board. These were avenues where I could express myself and be that voice for young people. Because our young people are often left out of conversation. We are neglected, we slip through the cracks, our voices aren't heard where it matters most. And politics wasn't the first thing in my mind. Like any ethnic parents, my parents were like, medicine. That's your way, you're going to become a doctor. And it's like, man, life's tough.
Yeah, I have to admit I did get that.
And it doesn't, it's not for everyone. Hats off to all the doctors out there, you're doing an amazing job and serving humanity. But leadership and politics is my way of serving humanity. And I think it is so important to value both professions and every other profession that we're leading the way, inspiring our youth and saying, look, if I could do it, so can you. And in my particular case, I just wanted that sense of belonging. And I think the Labour Party and Young Labour gave me that platform where I met with young people who resonated, shared the same values of camaraderie, of fairness, equality, fighting for social justice, wanting change, action around climate change, wanting to see that diversity in society and that multiculturalism, for us to embrace it and not just use it as confetti and just throw it around like, oh yeah, we're a multicultural nation, but what are we doing about it? Are we really immersing ourselves in understanding one another? And, like there's that, the ayah in the Quran that talks about, you're made from different nations and tribes so that you may get to know one another, right? And that's the whole purpose and essence of life, to get to know one another, to use our differences and seek wisdom in those differences and use our similarities to strengthen ourselves and move on as a nation and towards progress. So politics was not always the number one option, but here we are today.
And I think it was definitely, like we say, Allah does and God does things for a reason. You're definitely the right person to be representing us. As I mentioned, your resilience, your confidence, and also the fact that you are just true to your faith. You have pursued this career without compromising that, and it didn't feel the need to compromise it. And I think that just sort of goes hand in hand with the fact that we can still be Muslim and still pursue careers and serve our country, which is Australia. We all work for the government here. I'm a government worker, and I did get questions like, how can you be a Muslim and support this country? That it doesn't make sense, But the other side to it is this whole idea of loyalty to country is part of faith, and we've been taught that. Prophet Muhammad also, discusses the idea of loyalty and how it's so important to your faith. But we all serve in different capacities, and I think it's really important that we, inspire younger Muslim girls, I should say, to move into careers that serve mankind in whatever way, even if it is being a doctor or an engineer. And that just sort of leads me to that question. Like in your speech, you did make many praises and comments of how blessed and grateful we should be to be here in Australia. And as Muslims, serving our country is the root of this, whether it's in civil society or working in these professional capacities. So we're here to show that Muslim women, we are here to integrate. We don't have any secret agenda. We are Australian. I pretty much have been here my whole life as well. So what are your thoughts on this? Can we still be Muslim and still be loyal to our country?
100%. Islam's fundamentally based on service, whether it's service, to mankind, whether it's serving your creator, whether it's serving your parents, whether it's serving your community. We're based on service. And I don't know which exact ayah, but, we are instructed to order and obey the laws of the land. We have migrated from our home countries, our Muslim home countries, to seek knowledge, which is permissible. But it's what are we doing with the opportunities that are, either laid in front of us or the opportunities that, and doors opening at our face. I think with the Muslim youth and the Muslim community, the evolution hasn't happened as much as we'd want it to. And when I say evolution, it's about accepting themselves as Australians and saying, you know what, I'm contributing to the progression of this country. And it's part and parcel of a harmonious society, right? Like we can ask and seek for multicultural representation, but if we're not doing anything about it within our own communities and we're not empowering our women, we're not empowering our men, because, we say we want Muslim women, but we also want people of all walks of life and all, especially culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds to get involved in that space. And it's all based on merit. It's not tokenism that we're talking about here. It's not, oh, well, Fatima got selected as the third Labor senator because she's a hijabi. Like, there's thousands of hijabis out there, right? It's ensuring that, you align with the values, but also you have the drive and motivation to pursue that career. It's like, if you put me in a medical career and have no passion for it, like, I'll be the worst doctor in the world. So it's finding those people who are thriving, who are learning, and who are keen in that space, and allowing them and providing them those platforms to really immerse themselves. And that's how I got introduced. And I think that's something I'll continue working on in my term as a senator for the next 6 years, to ensure that I am that accessible politician that anyone can relate to, but at the same time, anyone can come and have a chat. Like, I'm not some high and mighty, cold-hearted person that, has thousands of like different barriers that you have to cross to get to me. I want to give back to the community that's given me so much. And talking about resilience, it's not easy. And yes, sometimes we Muslims think, oh, why do I have to work that extra bit harder? We find ourselves, if I want a job promotion, I have to work twice as hard as another friend of mine or colleague that doesn't identify as a cowed person. And it's like, well, so what? Like, what is the problem? I mean, we are working hard, and perhaps it's about putting ourselves in those positions where we've got the influence, but we're encouraging those who are following in our footsteps to be like, I'm mentoring you. Like, I've had it tough. I may have had challenges that you can avoid by doing this and this and this, right? And it's that mentoring, and it's that cycle of giving back. If I've received so much help, I'm going to give twice as much more.
Yeah, and I think just you being here today is definitely a great example of that, giving back to you're passing on your wisdom, and the fact that you have this role, and it is a misconception that there are these barriers to try and reach a senator, but the fact that you had opened your doors and welcomed the opportunity for us to just talk to you, in a very lighthearted conversation and discuss this, because there is that idea out there that, okay, politicians and very hard to speak to, but I think you're very much a very true example of how we need that openness and the communication now, especially as a Muslim, to the Muslim community who do feel that there is those barriers. And growing up in this sort of society, we are still dealing with aftermaths of unfortunate incidents, whether it be Christchurch or even going back to 9/11. And this idea that, yes, we have to kind of prove ourselves a little bit more in the workplace. I've had my fair share of that. It wasn't easy getting to where I am, even as a lawyer. And unfortunately, we've had to deal with those aftermaths. And I kind of want to now sort of talk a little bit about how we can sort of look forward and change that narrative, which is, what we do at Muslims Down Under, especially things like, radicalization. That's a process which has increasingly become associated with Muslim youth, particularly, the younger generations from many years ago. So I really loved the value and the importance you placed on how your family has shaped you, who you are today. So they've encouraged you to stay true to your roots and also become a respectable member of this society. How, as a young Muslim woman, how have your family values empowered you to be the person you are today? And I know you touched on this a little bit, but in the context of changing that narrative, what do you think that message would be out to perhaps parents, not just the Muslim community, but culturally, linguistically diverse backgrounds? What do you think the importance of family is growing up as an Australian now?
I think it's important to also acknowledge people who are doing it tough. Maybe they have lost a parent. Like, I definitely know the challenges are so much greater on my mum now that my dad's no longer around. So acknowledging that there are single parents or parents who are widowed out there who are doing it tough. And I appreciate the hard work, because I know the stress that our parents place on us, it comes from a good place. They just care about us. They love us so much, and they're so protective of us that sometimes it may come across as them being helicopter parents, or, you know, they're just overbearing. But it's always good for us to remind ourselves that it's coming from a good place and it's coming from just genuine care. Now, I guess the message to parents is, there was a period of time that I taught at an Islamic college. I pioneered a leadership course, and that was to boost students' levels of confidence, skill sets like delegation, teamwork, public speaking skills, ensuring that they have a platform to voice their opinions, but also have that discipline to be able to listen to others. So become active listeners rather than just talking over one another. And so it ranged from year 7s to year 10s. Now, the reason why I'm expressing that example is I met a lot of students who were going through immense pressure to study something that their parents wanted them to be. Like, I know we joke around and say our parents wanted us to become doctors, but we forget the amount of pressure that was on us to actually deliver it. Until, I guess, my parents started seeing me fainting at the sight of blood. They're like, we can't go to medicine, it's fine.
Yeah.
And it's like, pharmacy. And I was like, oh, the medical field is
second best
everything.
option. Right.
But like,
stay with the medical.
Exactly. And I think what my mum has experienced with me in particular is allowing your children to pursue what they're passionate about, or what motivates them and drives them, is going to get them far greater results in the long run than it is in the short run. Like, perhaps your child is going to enter medicine because they're intelligent and they can, but their heart's not there. And that's a disservice to the rest of the community, because they're not there for the right reasons. They're not doing it out of, you know, the goodness and that sense of interest and enthusiasm. They're just doing it because they have to, right? And those little students, year 7, year 8 students coming up to me and saying, Miss, I really don't like maths, and my parents just want me to become a doctor or an engineer, and I really don't want to. I want to become a data scientist, or I want to become a IT professional. And it's like, you do you. But it's, how do we communicate that to parents without sort of, you know, saying, oh no, your kids are worthless. It's not about a child's profession or a person's speech, because it's something so close to my heart. As somebody who was grieving and was going through so much anxiety and depression and just not knowing how to handle loss. But loss is in many forms. I lost my dad. Some people can lose jobs. They can lose their relationships. They can lose their children. There's got to be this open dialogue within our communities to be like, we need to prioritize mental health. Yes, we've got huge emphasis on spiritual health, you know, and making sure that we pray 5 times, we're, you know, steadfast on the deen. But it's like, what are we doing with our children when it comes to their mental health, their emotional health? Because I didn't grow up talking about emotion. I actually didn't know. The first time I sat with my psychologist, I didn't know how to describe my feelings, which in a way is concerning, because we are going to be the future mothers of generations to come. And if we're going to hope to nurture leaders, we need to make sure we've got the skill sets and that we're okay. When it comes to our mental health. So, yeah.
No, definitely. Especially with this idea of, you know, keeping the young busy in the right things. You know, you talked a lot about service. You participate in a lot of extracurricular activities, whether it be in a local level at university. I think it's the idea of that we're engaging in some way or another in whatever capacity you can. I think each and every aspect is very important. So we definitely resonate with that. In Muslims Down Under, we did a whole podcast on parenting. So we actually discussed, and one of our sponsors is the Muslim community, and the worldwide Caliph Mirza Masroor Ahmed. He actually encourages and says that if mothers are well educated religiously and with secular education, that we can save our children. So the emphasis is, you know, we do as Muslims, we do have this idea about, the importance of family values. So Muslims Down Under, so just in terms of like everything that we've discussed today, Muslim Down Under is that national platform that we've developed in response to the guidance from Mirza Masroor Ahmed, the Caliph, as a campaign to provide education and awareness about Islam. So in my very humble opinion, the fact that you and I, two hijab wearing Muslim women, lawyer, senator, I think we have definitely evolved over the many years, especially us sitting in the Australian Parliament. I would never have envisioned this. I don't know if you would have.
Never in a million
coming
years.
to Australia at 8 years old, I think, when you were a refugee. I don't think I ever would have thought that this would have been possible. So to kind of like move things, I think things are moving positively. What do you think? Are we moving in the right direction in terms of acceptance, tolerance, and perhaps removing Islamophobia?
So in terms of that, the broader community has definitely shown appetite for that representation, especially in an institution like the Parliament, where we make legislation that impacts the lives of so many Australians. No matter what walk of life you're from, it is important that you have your voice heard and your voice represented in Parliament. And so seeing the election of so many multicultural, MPs and senators, it definitely gives us hope that Australia is moving in the right direction. The onus now is on our communities to actually take that courage and embrace the opportunities of getting involved in whatever shape and form. I definitely would think that Islamophobia is not as rife as it was a few years ago. And perhaps, that infamous senator who wore the burqa and called for the ban is no longer even making eye contact with me, even though we're in the same chamber sitting opposite each other. But I think people are making more friends. They are seeing individuals and meeting individuals like you and I and saying, oh, well, like, you're not too bad. You're just like me, you like Netflix and you like this show and like you like to go down to the park and, have a cup of coffee and just enjoy life and just mind your own business, just like anyone else. And it's all chill. Like, I just don't understand why a piece of our attire will make such a big difference and will overshadow our contributions, right? And I think when as soon as I was elected and everyone was sensationalizing, the fact about my hijab and being the first hijab wearing, it was like, all right, I do wear a hijab, but like, get over it. Like, it's part of my dress code. I'm just more than that. It's like, do you look at the Prime Minister and say, oh my God, that's a Prime Minister who wears a jacket? It's like, no, like, we're more than that. But also it is that discourse. It's what sort of conversations we're having with our youth so that they're proud of wearing that hijab. If they choose to wear the hijab, good on you. If you don't choose to wear the hijab, good on you still. Like, we're all in our own journeys. And sometimes it's a lot tougher on some people than it is for others. But we all deserve that same respect and we all deserve that same sense of belonging, but also having that freedom to choose what we want to do in life. Because the democratic freedoms we enjoy in Australia, we're so privileged to have. And I think people often underestimate that. And I just want to send a massive message out there. Whoever you are, wherever you're from, be proud of your identity and roots, because it's our diversity that brings so much beauty to Australia. And don't let anyone tell you otherwise, because if you've accepted Australia as home, Australia has accepted you as an Australian.
It's amazing. What a beautiful way to wrap that up. And I think I'll leave it on that great positive note. And again, thank you so much, Senator Payman, for your time. I know you have a very busy schedule now, but I'm really, really grateful for you taking out time in your busy schedule for, and meeting us here today. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
It's been great.